What would you do if someone told you that you didn't belong in a seat you had already paid for? For Elijah Grant, a black CEO, a man used to commanding boardrooms and shaping billion-dollar deals, that moment came 35,000 feet above the ground. A senior flight attendant stood in front of him, her voice firm, her eyes cold, demanding he move for another passenger, not because of a booking error, not because of safety, but because of something unspoken and undeniable. What followed wasn't just an argument over a seat. It was a clash between quiet dignity and systemic bias, a test of how far one man would go to stand his ground not just for himself, but for every passenger who had ever been dismissed, diminished, or told they didn't belong. Could one voice, calm and measured, change the course of an entire airline in the middle of a flight? Could the rules be rewritten before the wheels even touched the runway? Stay with us as we step inside the cabin, feel the tension in the air, and watch a single moment turn into a movement. If this story matters to you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss what comes next. The boarding gate at JFK's Terminal 5 buzzed with the usual blend of impatience and background noise. Rolling suitcases clacked against tile, flight announcements echoed overhead, and the faint smell of coffee drifted from the kiosk across the way. Elijah Grant stood at the front of the VIP boarding lane, his boarding pass in one hand and a worn leather briefcase in the other. He wasn't a man who sought attention. In fact, his style was understated navy suit, white shirt, no flashy tie, polished but not ostentatious. He had built Grant Global Logistics from a small startup into a billion-dollar force in the tech-driven freight world. But here, in the airport, he was just another traveler. Or at least, that's how it should have been. When his boarding group was called, Eli stepped forward, greeted the gate agent with a polite smile, and scanned his pass. A soft chime confirmed what he already knew. Seat 1A, VIP first class, the kind of suite that came with sliding doors, personalized service, and the quiet he needed to review the final draft of a $900 million merger agreement. The cabin smelled faintly of leather and citrus polish. Eli slid his briefcase into the storage space beside his seat, adjusted the seat's recline, and pulled out a thin folder. This deal had been months in the making, and ironically, the merger was with Pacific Skies Airlines' parent company. Tomorrow, he would sit across from their board to finalize terms. He had just uncapped his pen when a shadow fell across the page. "Sir, this isn't your seat," a voice said, crisp and cold enough to slice through the quiet. Eli looked up. A tall woman in a perfectly pressed uniform stood over him, arms crossed. The name badge read, Ava Collins. Her expression carried the kind of confidence that comes from years of being obeyed without question. "Pardon me," Eli asked, keeping his tone calm. "This seat belongs to another passenger," she said, holding out her hand as if expecting him to drop his documents into it. Eli offered his boarding pass instead. "This is my assigned seat, ma'am. 1A, Elijah Grant." Ava took the pass without even glancing at it for more than a second. "Anyone can print a fake ticket," she said. "This seat is for a paying first-class customer." The words landed heavier than they should have. Paying customer. Eli's mind noted the phrasing. His status as one wasn't up for debate, but clearly, to her, something else was. Behind Ava, a white man in a tailored blazer shifted impatiently. His hair was styled with expensive precision, and the Rolex on his wrist flashed as he tapped it against the bulkhead. "Finally," the man said with an exaggerated sigh. "Some of us have connections to make." Ava turned slightly toward him. "Mr. Kane, we'll have you seated in just a moment." Eli closed his folder and placed it neatly on his lap. Ma'am, I've been a Pacific Skies Platinum Executive member for 7 years. This is my confirmed seat. He offered his Platinum card along with the boarding pass. Ava barely looked at it. These can be faked, too. I've seen all kinds of knockoff cards. Security's gotten very sophisticated at catching fraudulent upgrades. From across the aisle, a young woman in seat 1C glanced over. She was probably in her 20s, wearing large glasses and a faded denim jacket. Her phone was angled discreetly toward the exchange. Maya Torres didn't say anything, but her TikTok live notification popped up to a handful of friends. Flight discrimination, she typed into the caption. Eli noticed her out of the corner of his eye. It didn't change his tone, but it did add a layer of calculation to his next words. Perhaps if you check your manifest, he said evenly, you'll see my name. Ava's lips pressed into a thin line. We don't have time for games. There's a legitimate first-class passenger waiting, and you're holding up departure. Wesley Kane. So that was the man's name, smirked. Look, buddy, I'm sure there's a perfectly good seat in business class. No need to make this awkward. The cabin's air seemed to grow heavier. Eli could feel eyes on him from the row behind. A woman whispered to her husband. A man in 3C frowned but said nothing. Eli's phone buzzed in his jacket pocket. He didn't need to check it to guess it would be his assistant, probably reminding him of tomorrow's board meeting agenda. The irony wasn't lost on him. Today, he was living the kind of problem he was meant to help solve for the airline's leadership. Sir, Ava said more firmly, company policy requires passengers to comply with crew instructions in seating disputes. You can file a complaint later if you believe there's been a mistake. Maya's viewer count ticked upward. The chat scrolled. This is disgusting. Call the news. Same old story. Eli took a slow breath, steadying his voice. He'd been in enough high-stakes negotiations to know that power often shifted not with volume, but with timing. Still, the sting of being told in front of strangers that he didn't belong where he had paid to be was a wound that pressed against years of other, smaller cuts. Ava shifted her stance, blocking his view toward the front of the plane. Wesley made a show of checking his watch again. The PA system announced departure in 18 minutes. Please take your seats. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a thought began to form, a reminder that there was more than one way to win a fight. For now, though, he kept his seat, his folder still closed on his lap, and his eyes locked on the flight attendant who seemed so sure she had all the authority in the world. The hum of the air conditioning was the only sound for a moment. Then Ava Collins tilted her chin upward, the gesture carrying an unspoken warning. She still stood blocking Eli's view of the aisle, as if her presence alone could force him to surrender the seat. I'm not going to ask again, she said, her voice low but firm enough to carry to the first few rows. We have procedures for situations like this. Eli looked down at the boarding pass still in her hand. And what procedure says to remove a paying passenger from their confirmed seat without checking the manifest? Ava's eyes narrowed. She didn't answer. Instead, she turned to the man behind her. Mr. Kane, if you could just hold a moment, we'll have you seated. Wesley Kane gave an exaggerated shrug as though he were the victim here. Look, I am just trying to make my connection. I didn't expect to get stuck behind some drama. From across the aisle. Maya Torres kept her phone steady. At first, she had started recording out of habit. She had seen clips like this go viral before, the kind that made people argue in the comments for days. But as she listened to the tone in Ava's voice and the subtle satisfaction in Wesley's smirk, she realized this one was different. Her stream had only a dozen viewers when she began. Now there were almost 100. She had titled it simply, First-Class Discrimination Happening Now. Comments began to flow in faster. Name the airline. Show his ticket. This is unreal. Eli felt the eyes on him multiply. Every second he stayed in the seat without complying, as Ava put it. The tension grew thicker. He could feel the quiet discomfort from other passengers. Some shifted in their seats and avoided eye contact, while others stared openly, waiting to see what would happen next. He weighed his options. He could stand, move to whatever seat Ava offered, and send an email to the CEO tomorrow. That would be the polite route, the safe route. It would also mean letting this moment pass without challenge, reinforcing the very behavior that had put him in this position. Ava finally glanced at the boarding pass again, almost reluctantly. She held it like something that might burn her fingers. "I am going to verify this with the purser," she said. Her tone implied she already knew what the outcome would be. She turned toward the galley and disappeared, leaving Wesley standing in the aisle beside 1A. He looked at Eli, a thin smile playing on his lips. "You know, this would be so much easier if you just went along with it. It is just a seat." Eli did not answer. He had learned long ago that not every comment deserved the gift of a response. Instead, he opened his briefcase, removed a pen, and placed it beside the closed folder. A small, deliberate act of control. When Ava returned, she was not alone. Beside her was Sandra Holt, the purser. Her uniform was immaculate, her hair in a perfect bun, and her expression carried the calm authority of someone used to ending disputes quickly. "Sir," Sandra began, "there seems to be some confusion with your ticket. We do have you booked on this flight, but there is a question regarding your seat assignment." "There is no question," Eli replied, his voice even. "The ticket says 1A. My boarding pass says 1A. My reservation confirmation says 1A. Sandra gave a small smile that did not reach her eyes. "Sometimes there are last-minute changes. We can offer you a seat in premium economy. It is very comfortable, and you will still arrive at the same time." Maya's phone caught every word. Her viewers jumped past 200. The chat was starting to turn into a chorus of disbelief. "This is outrageous! Stay in your seat, sir! We are watching!" Eli clasped his hands together in his lap. "I will be remaining in my assigned seat," he said. Sandra's smile faded. She turned to Wesley. "Mr. Kane, we will have you seated shortly." He gave a smug nod. "Glad we can sort this out." The public address system chimed. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats for departure. We will be pushing back in 18 minutes. Ava stepped closer to Sandra and whispered something. Whatever it was, it caused Sandra's posture to stiffen. She straightened, looked back at Eli, and said, "Sir, if you do not comply, we may have to involve security." Maya's stream viewer count spiked to 400. The chat was moving so fast she could barely read it. People were asking for the airline name, flight number, anything to tag in their own posts. Eli's phone buzzed again in his pocket. This time, he glanced at the screen. A message from his assistant board meeting tomorrow at 9. Confirm final talking points. He silenced the phone without replying. The irony was sharp. Tomorrow's meeting was set to discuss diversity and inclusion initiatives for Pacific Skies Airlines. Today, their frontline staff were giving him a live demonstration of why such initiatives were not just corporate window dressing. Sandra stepped back and folded her arms. "Final call. Sir, move to premium economy or we will have security escort you from the aircraft." Eli met her gaze. "I will wait for security." The air between them tightened. Wesley shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable with how public this was becoming. Ava, however, seemed to relish the moment, her stance unyielding. Maya's phone vibrated in her hand. Friends were texting her, "We are screen recording. Don't stop. This is going viral." The thought flickered across Eli's mind that he was no longer just a passenger in a private dispute. He was part of a story that was already leaving the walls of this cabin, a story that might travel faster than the plane itself. He leaned back in his seat, not in defiance, but in quiet certainty. Whatever happened next, he would not be the one to look away. The murmur of passengers talking in low voices carried through the cabin as the minutes to departure ticked away. Eli remained in his seat, posture calm, but every detail of his surroundings imprinted in his mind. The slow swaying of the overhead bins as people shuffled bags into place, the metallic click of the cabin door latching shut, the way Wesley Kane avoided looking directly at him now, as if unsure whether to double down on his earlier smugness or quietly fade into anonymity. Ava Collins had disappeared toward the galley again. When she returned, she was not alone. A new figure followed behind her, a woman with a perfectly tailored uniform and the air of someone who had been solving passenger disputes for a decade or more. Her name tag read Sandra Holt. Sandra's smile was practiced, her voice warm in a way that was designed to lower defenses. But the moment she glanced from Ava to Eli, there was a faint tightening around her eyes that told him her mind was already made up. She had heard one version of the story, and it had been enough to frame her approach. "Mr. Grant," she began, "I am the purser on this flight. I understand there is some confusion about your seat assignment." Eli met her gaze. "There is no confusion. I have a confirmed booking for seat 1A. Sandra took the boarding pass from Ava and looked it over, but only for a moment. She did not reach for the passenger manifest. She did not pull up the system on her tablet. Instead, she said, "Sometimes seat changes occur due to operational needs. We do have a very nice seat for you in premium economy, and you will still arrive at the same time." Eli's fingers rested on the leather cover of his folder. "I selected this seat weeks ago, paid for it, checked in early to secure it. I am not moving." The warm tone in Sandra's voice cooled a degree. "We try to resolve seating issues with minimal disruption. Please understand we have another passenger who has been ticketed for this seat." Maya Torres's phone caught every syllable. Her live stream had climbed to more than 800 viewers now, her comments section a mix of outrage and demands for accountability. The words "name the airline" and "show the manifest" flashed past so quickly she could barely read them. Eli sat still. "I have no issue with you checking the manifest," he said evenly. "I am confident what you find will match what is in my hand." Sandra's lips pressed together, but she made no move toward a system check. Instead, she looked at Wesley Kane, who was hovering a few steps away, shifting impatiently from foot to foot. "Mr. Kane, we will have you seated shortly," she assured him. "Glad to hear it," he replied, his voice carrying that same note of self-importance that had grated on Eli from the start. The public address system chimed again. "Departure in 16 minutes. All passengers, please take your seats." Sandra stepped a fraction closer to Eli. "Sir, refusing to comply with crew instructions can result in removal from the aircraft and potential bans from future travel on this airline." Eli considered her words, weighing the tone. It was not a warning meant to inform. It was a lever of authority, meant to push him into compliance without further argument. Maya's viewers passed 1,000. Some of them had begun tagging news outlets in the comments. Others were speculating about whether the airline would try to force him off before takeoff. Eli leaned back slightly, keeping his voice low enough to remain measured, but clear enough for Sandra to hear. "I am not refusing to comply with legitimate crew instructions. I am refusing to surrender my confirmed seat without a valid reason." Ava shifted beside Sandra, her arms crossed. "Security will decide what is valid. We are not going to delay this flight because of one passenger who thinks rules do not apply to him." The statement hung in the air, heavy with implication. Wesley looked between the three of them. maybe we can just get this sorted quickly, he offered, though his tone still lacked any real empathy. He wanted his seat, but he also did not want to be the subject of a viral scandal. Sandra tapped her earpiece. "Paul, can you join us at the front of the cabin?" A male voice crackled in response. "On my way." Moments later, a man in a dark blazer with a ground operations badge appeared. His hair was short, his manner brisk. "Paul Denton," he said. "I hear we have a seating issue." Before Eli could respond, Ava spoke. "Passenger is in the wrong seat, presenting what appear to be fraudulent documents, refusing to comply with relocation to premium economy." Paul looked at Eli with an expression that was neither hostile nor friendly, just transactional. "Sir, for the sake of departure, we need you to move to the seat assigned by the crew. You can file a complaint later." Eli's mind noted the phrasing again. "Not the seat you booked. Not the seat in your reservation. The seat assigned by the crew?" The subtle shift in wording was everything. "I will remain in my confirmed seat," Eli said quietly. Paul straightened. "Then I will have to involve security to escort you off." Maya's phone picked up the entire exchange. Her comments section lit up. "He is being targeted. Do not move. They are on camera." Eli's phone buzzed again. Another message from his assistant CEO of Pacific Skies just confirmed tomorrow's meeting location. He did not open it. The absurdity of the timing was almost too perfect. Sandra folded her arms. Ava took a step back, her eyes on Paul as if waiting for him to act. Wesley checked his watch again, sighing loudly. Eli took in the faces around him. The older couple in 2B and 2C who looked uneasy but stayed silent. The young businessman in 3A who frowned but kept his eyes on his laptop. The truth was simple. Standing up in these moments always felt lonely until it wasn't. Paul's radio crackled again, security en route. Eli felt the hum of the engines through the floor. The cabin smelled faintly of the meal service warming in the galley. And beneath it all, there was that pulse of humiliation, not just for himself, but for every unspoken moment that had led to this one. He adjusted the cuff of his sleeve, his mind already thinking ahead. There were times to fight a battle in the open, and times to let the pressure build until the other side did not even realize they had walked into a trap. He decided this would be the latter. The aisle cleared as the uniformed figure stepped onto the aircraft. Officer Renee Caldwell carried herself with a quiet authority, her navy blazer marked with the gold insignia of airport security. Her gaze moved quickly across the cabin, reading the tension in the air. She stopped beside Paul Denton, who leaned toward her and began speaking in a low voice. "Passenger in 1A, Paul said, tilting his head toward Eli. "Crew reports he is refusing to comply with a seating change. Possible fraudulent boarding documents." Renee looked from Paul to Eli. The description had already framed the situation, but her eyes lingered on the boarding pass in Eli's hand. She took a step forward, her voice calm. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass and identification?" "Please," Eli handed both over without hesitation. "Certainly." "Officer." She examined the documents with practiced precision. The boarding pass clearly stated Seat 1A. The name matched the driver's license. The ticket had been issued 2 weeks earlier, and there was a verified platinum executive status marker. Nothing about it suggested forgery. "These appear valid," Renee said after a moment. Ava Collins crossed her arms. "We have had incidents with fake tickets before. The seat belongs to another passenger." Renee's expression remained neutral, but Eli caught the flicker of something in her eyes. She had heard this before, maybe too many times. Paul stepped in. "Officer, you know as well as I do that crew authority is final on seating assignments. FAA regulations support that." Renee nodded reluctantly. That is correct. The captain and crew can make final seating determinations for operational reasons. Maya Torres's livestream picked up every word. Her viewer count had surged past 1,500. People in the comments began posting the flight number and tagging Pacific Skies Airlines official account. Others were asking if anyone knew the name of the passenger in 1A. Eli sat back in his seat. "And what operational reason justifies removing me from my confirmed seat?" he asked quietly. Sandra Holt answered for them. "We are not required to disclose that to you, sir." Eli glanced at Renee. "Officer, am I under suspicion of any criminal activity?" Renee shook her head. "No, sir. But the airline can refuse to transport you if you do not comply with crew instructions." The hum of the aircraft seemed louder now. Eli could feel the weight of the moment pressing in. Every instinct told him to push back hard, to make them explain themselves in front of every camera in the cabin. But another instinct, the one honed in boardrooms and negotiation tables, told him to let them walk further into their own mistake. Renee leaned closer to him, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "Sir, I know this is wrong, but fighting it here will not end in your favor. Let me walk you off calmly." Eli met her eyes. He saw no malice there, only a weary understanding. "Officer Caldwell," he said, equally low, "you are absolutely correct. Fighting it here will not help anyone." The PA chimed again. "Final call for boarding. Departure in 10 minutes. Paul straightened his shoulders. "Sir, please gather your belongings." Eli moved slowly, deliberately. He closed the folder on his lap, placed it into his briefcase, and stood. The moment he rose, Ava's posture shifted with satisfaction. Wesley Kane, standing nearby, stepped forward toward the seat as though the exchange were complete. Maya's phone recorded Wesley lowering himself into 1A. Finally, he muttered, not bothering to hide it, "Some people just need to learn their place." The comment detonated in Maya's live stream. Screenshots were posted instantly to Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. The hashtags Learn Your Place and Flight Discrimination began trending within minutes. Eli adjusted the strap of his briefcase. He could feel the vibration of his phone in his pocket, call after call from numbers he recognized: his assistant, his legal counsel, a member of the Pacific Skies Board. He ignored them all. The cabin door was just ahead, the air from the jet bridge cooler than the pressurized cabin. Renee stayed beside him, walking him toward the exit. She kept her expression professional for the watching passengers, but when they were a step from the doorway, she murmured, "I will be filing my own report on this." "I appreciate that," Eli replied. Behind them, the crew's body language shifted as if they had already moved on. Sandra returned to the galley. Ava began preparing the cabin for takeoff. Wesley ordered champagne. The sense in the air was that the problem had been resolved. They had no idea the problem had only just begun. Eli paused at the threshold, turning back toward the row he had left. The passengers still watching expected him to disappear without a word. Instead, he reached into his briefcase and withdrew a slim silver case. From it, he pulled a business card and handed it to Renee. "You might want to keep that," he said. She glanced at it. Elijah Grant, founder and chief executive officer, Grant Global Logistics. Then he pulled out a second card, this one heavier, embossed with the Pacific Skies Airlines logo and the words Series A Preferred Stock Certificate, 22% ownership. The air in the cabin seemed to still. Those close enough to see the card leaned forward. The murmurs began, small at first. Sandra looked up from the galley. Ava froze halfway through, pouring a glass of champagne for Wesley. Eli spoke clearly enough for the nearest rows to hear. "Tomorrow's board meeting was set to finalize our company's investment in this airline. Tonight, you have given me all the data I need. Maya's viewers jumped past 3,000. Her comment feed was a blur of capital letters and exclamation points. Paul's radio crackled with someone asking for a status update. He ignored it, his eyes locked on the card in Eli's hand. Without raising his voice, Eli added, "Tell your district manager I would like a word." The moment the words left Eli's mouth, the atmosphere inside the first-class cabin changed. It was no longer just a disagreement about a seat. People could sense there was something deeper at play. The murmurs spread in waves, first through the nearby rows and then further back as passengers passed along their versions of what they had just heard. Ava Collins took a step forward, her voice sharper now. "Mr. Grant, the time for conversation is over. You are officially delaying this flight." Eli looked at her without speaking. The silence stretched, heavy and unbroken, until Ava's expression wavered. Paul Denton tapped his radio. "Control. Passenger is still non-compliant. Please confirm security clearance to escort off the aircraft. From her seat across the aisle." Maya Torres shifted her phone, adjusting the angle to capture Eli in the frame with Ava standing over him. Her livestream viewers had crossed the 5,000 mark. People in the comments were urging her not to stop recording under any circumstances. Sandra Holt stepped closer, adding her voice to the chorus of authority. "Sir, either you take the seat we have offered you in premium economy, or we will have to involve additional security." Eli rested his briefcase on the floor between his feet. "I am not refusing to comply with legitimate safety instructions. I am refusing to be displaced from the seat I purchased without a valid operational reason." Wesley Kane leaned back in 1A, making himself comfortable. He held his champagne flute with exaggerated care, the bubbles catching the cabin light. "This is why we have rules," he said under his breath, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Some people just do not know how to follow them. Maya's stream caught it. The comment section exploded. Screenshots and clips began moving across social platforms in real time. Hashtags multiplied. Rear flight discrimination was now joined by VIP seat scandal. The PA system chimed again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are now 12 minutes from departure. All passengers must be seated." Paul gestured toward Eli. "Sir, this is your final chance to avoid removal." Eli stood slowly, deliberately. His movements were measured, as though every step was part of a plan. The leather of his briefcase creaked softly as he picked it up. He turned to face Ava and Sandra, meeting each of their eyes in turn. "You are certain this is how you wish to proceed?" he asked. Ava lifted her chin. "Absolutely." Sandra nodded once. "This is in accordance with company policy." Eli exhaled through his nose, then looked toward Renee Caldwell, who stood a few steps away. "Officer Caldwell, I will leave the aircraft as instructed." The relief on Paul's face was visible. "Thank you, sir." But Eli was not finished. He reached into his briefcase and removed a single sheet of thick, cream-colored paper. Its edges were embossed, the lettering precise and formal. He held it out to Sandra. "This is my formal introduction. Elijah Grant, founder and CEO of Grant Global Logistics." Sandra accepted it without understanding at first. When her eyes reached the bottom line, her expression changed. Confusion flickered, then something sharper. She looked up at him, but he was already pulling a second document from the case. This one bore the Pacific Skies Airlines logo in gold foil. Underneath, in bold lettering, it read, "Series A Preferred Stock Certificate, 22% ownership interest." The air in the cabin stilled. Even the subtle hum of the ventilation seemed quieter. Maya's stream caught every reaction. Ava's eyes widened just slightly before she forced her expression back into neutrality. Paul shifted his weight from one foot to the other. Wesley, still in 1A, set down his champagne without drinking it. Eli's voice was calm, almost conversational. This certificate represents the largest single private investment in Pacific Skies Airlines history. My company acquired this position last month. Tomorrow's board meeting was scheduled to finalize new corporate initiatives. Tonight, I have witnessed precisely why those initiatives are necessary. Sandra blinked, her voice tentative now. I was not aware of this. Mr. Grant, that, Eli replied, was the point. Paul cleared his throat. Mr. Grant, perhaps we can. Eli raised a hand slightly, cutting him off without raising his voice. You have made your decision. You have removed me from my confirmed seat. You have done so in full view of your passengers and in front of a live audience on social media.
The evidence is already circulating. The consequences of this choice will not be measured in minutes of delay, but in years of reputation. Wesley finally spoke, his voice smaller than before. I did not realize who you were. Eli turned toward him, his expression unreadable. You did not need to know who I was to treat me with basic respect. A ripple of quiet agreement moved through the cabin. Someone in row 3 muttered, "Exactly." Eli adjusted the strap of his briefcase and looked back at Renee. "Officer Caldwell, will you remain with me until the district manager arrives?" "Of course," she said, her tone respectful now. Sandra tapped her earpiece. "Carla, we need you on board immediately, from the back of the cabin." Maya shifted her phone again to capture the crew's reaction. Her viewer count was now over 10,000. Comments were coming in from different time zones. Journalists had entered the chat, asking for permission to use the footage. Eli could feel the weight of every eye on him, but his heartbeat was steady. He was not here to shout or to make a scene. He was here to make a record, and that record was already indelible. Ava opened her mouth as if to speak, then thought better of it. She busied herself with rearranging service items in the galley, but her hands moved too quickly, betraying the tension she was trying to mask. Paul stood awkwardly, radio in hand, waiting for the next instruction. The authority he had projected only minutes ago seemed to have diminished. Eli's phone vibrated again. This time, he glanced at the notification. A message from a board member. "We are watching the stream. We will be ready in the morning." He slipped the phone back into his pocket without responding. The aircraft door remained closed, the departure clock still ticking down. The captain had not yet made any announcement, but Eli knew word of the delay would be making its way to the cockpit. He took one last look at 1A, now occupied by Wesley, and then returned his gaze to Sandra. "When your district manager arrives, I suggest you brief her carefully. This is no longer just a customer service issue. This is a governance issue." Maya caught that line perfectly. She knew, even without context, that it would be replayed again and again. The tension in the air had shifted. No one moved. No one spoke above a whisper. They were all waiting for the next move. And Eli, standing calm in the narrow space of the first-class aisle, knew that the next move belonged to him. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed on the jet bridge before the cabin door opened. Conversations in the first few rows fell silent as a woman stepped inside. She wore a fitted navy blazer with a silver district manager badge pinned to her lapel. Her dark hair was pulled into a sleek ponytail, her stride purposeful. Carla Devereaux. She introduced herself quickly, her voice low but steady. She scanned the small cluster at the front of the cabin, Ava Collins standing near the galley, Sandra Holt with her hands clasped in front of her, Paul Denton holding his radio like a shield, Officer Renee Caldwell standing beside Elijah Grant. "What is the issue?" Carla asked. Sandra answered first. Passenger in 1A was asked to relocate due to a seating discrepancy. He refused to comply.
We were in the process of removing him when you found out I am a major shareholder in your airline," Eli finished evenly. Carla's eyes moved to him. "I beg your pardon." Eli reached into his briefcase, withdrew the stock certificate again, and held it out. The gold foil caught the overhead light. Elijah Grant, founder and CEO of Grant Global Logistics, 22% ownership interest in Pacific Skies Airlines as of last month. Carla took the document with both hands, scanning it quickly. She was no stranger to corporate filings and investor names, and this one she recognized immediately. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Why was I not informed of your travel today, Mr. Grant?" she asked, glancing toward Paul and Sandra. "That is a question for your internal communication channels," Eli replied calmly. "I booked this flight under my own name. No special arrangements, no alerts sent to corporate. I wanted to see the customer experience for myself. Tonight, I have seen more than enough." Maya's phone caught every word. Her live stream was approaching 15,000 viewers, the chat scrolling so quickly it was almost unreadable. Journalists were now commenting directly, asking for statements. Carla's attention shifted to Ava. "Walk me through exactly what happened from boarding until now." Ava began speaking, but her tone lacked the earlier confidence. "Passenger was in 1A. Mr. Kane had a confirmed ticket for that seat. I requested Mr. Grant move. He refused. His boarding pass appeared questionable." Carla cut in sharply. "Was the manifest checked?" Ava hesitated. "No, we did not reach that point." The pause spoke louder than any explanation could. Eli's voice was still even, but it carried weight. "I presented my boarding pass and platinum executive card immediately. Both were dismissed as potentially fake without verification. I was told I should move to premium economy where I belong." Several passengers shifted in their seats. The phrasing was unmistakable. Maya's camera zoomed slightly to capture Carla's reaction. Carla exhaled slowly, as though trying to contain the frustration building behind her composed expression. "Mr. Grant," she said, "I apologize for what you have experienced tonight. This is not how Pacific Skies conducts business." Eli shook his head slightly. "It is exactly how your frontline staff conduct business. That is why I am here." Sandra glanced down at the floor. Ava kept her gaze fixed somewhere over Carla's shoulder. Paul shifted uncomfortably, his radio still in his hand but silent now. Eli reached into his briefcase again, this time pulling out a sleek black folder. He opened it to reveal a printed document with the heading, "The Grant Protocol." Tomorrow's board meeting was meant to discuss this proposal. It outlines 5 mandatory reforms for eliminating bias and discrimination in your operations. Carla took the folder, flipping through the pages. Bias recognition training, real-time discrimination monitoring systems, an independent civil rights ombudsman, quarterly third-party diversity audits, a $50 million scholarship fund for underrepresented communities in aviation. "Those are the highlights," Eli said. "I came tonight to experience your service anonymously before tomorrow's vote. Now I have a real-world case study to present." Maya's audience surged past 20,000.
In the comments, people were already discussing the 5 points of the Grant Protocol as if they were part of a national policy debate. Carla looked at him. "You understand the weight of what you are saying, Mr. Grant. If this goes public, it is already public." Eli replied, glancing briefly at Maya's phone. "The footage is live. The hashtags are trending. Your stock price is already moving." Paul's head jerked up at that, moving how Eli tapped his phone screen, showing the after-hours trading chart, down 4% in the last 20 minutes. That is a market cap reduction of just under $900 million from one incident, and we are not even airborne yet. A ripple of unease moved through the small group at the front. Ava's face had paled. Sandra's hands tightened in front of her. Carla closed the folder. "Mr. Grant, I want to resolve this immediately." "Will you return to your seat in 1A?" Eli shook his head. "Not until I know that the crew members who created this situation will not be serving on this flight. I do not sit down to dinner with people who insult me before the first course." The statement landed with precision. Maya's viewers lit up the chat with approval. Carla turned to Paul. "Begin reassigning crew for this leg. Remove any staff directly involved from service." Paul hesitated, then nodded, speaking quietly into his radio. Eli looked around at the surrounding passengers. "You have all witnessed what happened here. You will also witness how it is handled. Accountability matters." The applause began in row 3, hesitant at first, then growing louder. The sound filled the cabin, an unmistakable signal that the tide had turned. Carla faced Eli again. "Mr. Grant, will you allow us to complete this process so we can depart?" "I will," Eli said, "but understand that tomorrow morning this conversation continues at the highest level. What happens in the air is a reflection of what happens on the ground." As the crew moved to carry out Carla's instructions, Maya lowered her phone for the first time in nearly an hour. Her hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the awareness that she had just recorded something that would ripple far beyond this flight. The cabin door remained closed, but the energy inside the aircraft had shifted entirely. What had started as a quiet humiliation was now a public reckoning. Passengers no longer pretended not to watch. Phones were out in plain sight, recording freely. Conversations that had been whispers were now murmurs that carried down the aisle. Carla Devereaux stood with the Grant Protocol folder still in her hand. She glanced toward Ava Collins, then to Sandra Holt. Both women avoided her gaze. Paul Denton was speaking softly into his radio, relaying instructions to remove Ava and Sandra from service for this flight. The sound of Ava's name over Paul's radio caused her to stiffen. She looked at Carla in disbelief. "You are pulling me off the flight." Carla's tone was firm. "You are being reassigned pending a review. We will speak further once we land." Ava pressed her lips together, her jaw tightening, but she said nothing. Meanwhile, Eli stood quietly, the stock certificate now resting on the closed folder in his briefcase. He was aware of the ripple effect his presence was creating. Every moment that passed was adding weight to the story being told in real time. He glanced toward Maya Torres. Her phone was still streaming, the viewer count now hovering near 28,000. Paul lowered his radio. "Replacement crew is on standby. We are clearing them through security now." Carla nodded, then turned back to Eli. "I will ensure this flight is staffed appropriately. In the meantime, is there anything you require?" Eli looked at her steadily. "I require this incident to be documented in full, with every detail included in your official report, and I require acknowledgement that what occurred was not a misunderstanding, but an act of bias." Carla hesitated. "The legal department will have to review wording," Eli interrupted softly, "is how accountability is erased." The sentence hung there, sharp enough to draw another murmur from nearby passengers. Someone in row 4 whispered, "He's right." In the galley, Ava began gathering her belongings. Sandra stood beside her, pale and rigid. The tension between them was unspoken but visible. Wesley Kane remained in 1A, his posture smaller now. The arrogance from earlier had been replaced with uncertainty. He had stopped making eye contact with anyone. Eli glanced toward him. "Mr. Kane," he said evenly, "I would suggest you consider returning to your original seat before this goes any further." Wesley swallowed hard. Yes, of course.
He stood and stepped into the aisle, moving past Eli without another word. The champagne glass sat abandoned on the armrest. The movement was caught on dozens of phones, Maya's included. The comments on her stream erupted. There it is. Walk of shame. Accountability in real time. Eli stepped back toward 1A, but did not sit down yet. He looked toward Carla. When the replacement crew arrives, I will take my seat. Carla agreed with a small nod, then moved toward the flight deck to update the captain. Maya lifted her eyes from her phone for a moment and studied Eli. There was a steadiness to him that she could not quite describe. He was not raising his voice, not making grand gestures, but everything about the way he stood made the entire space bend toward his presence. Paul's radio crackled again. Replacement crew cleared. Boarding now. 2 new attendants entered from the jet bridge, their expressions professional, but their eyes scanning the scene. They took over positions at the front of the cabin while Ava and Sandra stepped off the aircraft under the silent gaze of nearly every passenger. The aisle was quiet except for the sound of their footsteps. Eli finally returned to 1A. He placed his briefcase in the side compartment and sat down, buckling his seatbelt with deliberate calm. Maya's stream stayed fixed on him for a moment, capturing the symbolic image the man who had been told he did not belong. Now, back where he was supposed to be. The comments rolled in faster than she could read them. Carla returned from the cockpit and stood beside his seat. Mr. Grant, the captain extends his apologies for the delay. We will depart as soon as possible. Eli gave a small nod. Delays can be recovered. Reputations take longer. The remark was quiet but clear enough to be picked up on several recordings. A chime signaled an incoming message on Eli's phone. He glanced at the screen. It was from his general counsel. All major business networks are running the live stream. Do you want to go on record tonight? He slipped the phone back into his pocket without replying. Timing mattered, and the right moment had not yet arrived. Carla took a step closer. Mr. Grant, is there anything else you wish to address before we take off? Yes, Eli said. This flight, and the way it concludes, will be part of tomorrow's board meeting discussion. Your handling of the remainder of this journey will determine whether we are talking about a controlled recovery or a full-scale corporate crisis. Carla met his gaze. Understood. As she walked back toward the galley, Eli leaned slightly toward Maya's seat. Keep recording, he said quietly. She gave a quick nod. I will. The engines began to hum louder, a sign that the pushback would begin soon, but even with the normal pre-flight movements, there was an awareness in the cabin that this was no longer an ordinary flight. It was a live case study in corporate responsibility, and everyone on board knew it. Eli rested his hands on the armrests, posture straight, gaze steady. He knew the next few hours were just the beginning. The true impact would not be felt until the story was played and replayed across screens, dissected in newsrooms, and discussed in boardrooms. In the back of the aircraft, a man whispered to his seatmate, "We're going to be telling people we were on this flight for years." The flight attendants from the replacement crew began their safety checks, moving through the aisles with brisk efficiency. But the front of the plane still felt charged, like a stage after the opening act. But before the curtain fell, Maya glanced at her phone again. Her viewer count was over 32,000 now. She saw usernames she recognized from major media outlets. Her notifications were flooded with requests for interviews. She tilted the phone slightly to frame Eli in the shot as he looked out the window, the city lights of New York reflecting faintly on the glass. She did not know what he was thinking, but she suspected that whatever came next, it would not be small. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We will be departing shortly." The engines roared to life. The cabin vibrated, and the aircraft began to inch backward from the gate. The outside world could wait, but only for a little while. Inside 1A, Eli sat in silence, ready to carry this story beyond the walls of the aircraft and into the heart of the company that thought it could quietly remove him. The cabin lights dimmed as the aircraft climbed steadily into the night sky. The faint rumble of the engines filled the quiet spaces between passengers' low conversations. Even at cruising altitude, the tension in the first-class cabin had not dissolved. If anything, it had sharpened. Carla Devereaux remained near the front, occasionally glancing toward Eli in 1A. She held the Grant protocol folder as though it were both a challenge and a lifeline. She had spent the past 20 minutes reading every word, marking key points with the airline's branded pen. When the seatbelt sign chimed off, she approached. "Mr. Grant, do you have a moment to discuss the specifics of this proposal?" Eli closed the document he had been reviewing and gestured to the empty seat across the aisle. "Sit." She did, placing the folder between them on the small table. "I have read the outline. I understand the concepts, but the scope is extensive. Implementing all 5 points at once would be costly." Eli leaned back, his gaze steady. "The cost of doing nothing is already showing in your market value. Tonight's drop is only the beginning if you treat this as optional." Maya Torres angled her phone slightly, pretending to scroll, but her camera caught the exchange. Her live stream was still active, though she had muted her own microphone to avoid drawing attention. Viewers were waiting for every detail. Carla opened the folder. Point 1 mandatory bias recognition training for all frontline employees. 40 hours with annual recertification. That would require pulling thousands of staff from rotation each year. It will require commitment, Eli said, which is exactly why it works. If your people know you will invest in their awareness, they will know you are serious about change. She flipped the page. Point 2. A real-time discrimination monitoring system using artificial intelligence. The development cost alone $67 million. Eli finished for her. With an annual $12 million for maintenance, that system will track language, tone, and behavior patterns during passenger interactions. Supervisors will receive live alerts when bias is detected. It prevents escalation and creates an evidence trail.
"Tonight, it would have caught the way your crew dismissed my documentation." Carla's brow furrowed. Point 3. An independent civil rights ombudsman with termination authority. That would bypass layers of management. "That is the point," Eli said, his tone calm but unyielding. "Internal investigations often protect the company over the customer. An independent authority changes that." She hesitated, then turned to the next page. Quarterly diversity audits by third-party organizations, results published publicly and shared with regulators. "Transparency builds trust," Eli replied. "Your passengers will know you are accountable, and your investors will see you are managing risk." Her eyes fell to the final point. A $50 million diversity scholarship fund for underrepresented communities pursuing aviation careers. Eli nodded. "That fund builds your future workforce. It is also a signal to the industry that Pacific Skies is building a pipeline of talent from communities that have historically been excluded." Carla sat back in her seat, closing the folder. "You are asking for $165 million in the first year with ongoing annual costs. Our board will see this as a demand made under threat." Eli's gaze did not waver. "Call it a demand if you want. I call it a necessary investment to prevent nights like this from repeating. I am not here to damage Pacific Skies. I am here to make sure my investment is worth keeping." From her seat, Maya's phone caught Carla's brief moment of reflection. She seemed to realize that arguing the cost was pointless when the value of the airline's reputation was already bleeding in real time. "What if the board refuses?" she asked.
Then I divest, Eli said simply. And I take BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street with me. That is $2.3 billion in institutional investment gone overnight. Your stock price will fall until recovery is measured in years, not months. Carla's fingers tightened slightly on the folder. She had handled emergencies before, but never one where the outcome hinged on a conversation mid-flight. I will present this to the board, she said finally, but I cannot guarantee their decision. You do not need to guarantee it, Eli replied. You just need to deliver the truth of what happened tonight. Their eyes held for a moment longer before Carla stood, the folder still in her grip. I will prepare the report. As she stepped away, a man in business attire from row 2 leaned forward. Mr. Grant, he said in a low voice, I saw everything. If you need a witness statement, I will provide one. Eli nodded. Thank you. I may take you up on that. From the galley, one of the replacement flight attendants passed by, refilling drinks. She paused at Eli's seat. Sir, on behalf of my colleagues, I am sorry for what happened earlier. I know it is not my place, but I want you to hear that from me. I appreciate it, Eli said. What matters now is what changes from here. The attendant gave a small nod and moved on. Maya glanced at her phone. Her viewer count was holding steady above 35,000. People were dissecting each point of the Grant protocol in the comments. She could feel the story solidifying into something that would dominate headlines by morning. Eli opened his briefcase again and removed a slim tablet. He began reviewing tomorrow's board presentation, but his mind was already adapting it. Tonight's events would not just be a talking point, they would be the case study that framed every argument. He glanced out the window. Below, the city lights were a scattered constellation. Above, the sky was in unbroken darkness. Somewhere in that space, a decision was forming that would determine the course of an entire company. Across the aisle, Carla had taken a seat and was typing notes furiously into her laptop. The folder remained at her side, the edges already creased from her grip. In the quiet hum of the cabin, Eli understood something. The meeting tomorrow was no longer about persuading the board to adopt the protocol. It was about showing them that they had no other choice. The aircraft had leveled off. The steady hum of the engines formed a backdrop to the murmured conversations scattered through the cabin. But in first class, all eyes kept drifting toward 1A. Even without raising his voice, Eli Grant had become the axis around which the flight now turned. Carla Devereaux returned from her seat with a glass of water, setting it gently on the table beside him. Mr. Grant, she said, her voice low but deliberate. I have drafted the initial notes for the board, but I need to understand your bottom line before we land. Eli placed his tablet aside. My bottom line is the same as the one printed in that folder. The Grant protocol in its entirety. No trimming, no phasing it in over 5 years to appease shareholders. Immediate adoption. Carla exhaled slowly. If I present that as non-negotiable, there will be pushback. Some will say it was forced under duress. Eli leaned forward slightly. Carla, the board has 2 choices. They can see this as duress and watch the market punish them for resisting reform, or they can see it as an opportunity to lead the industry and watch competitors scramble to catch up. Which headline do you think investors prefer? The rows behind them were silent now. A businessman 2 seats back was pretending to work on his laptop, but had not typed a single word in 10 minutes. Maya Torres shifted her phone in her lap, angling it subtly so the camera captured both of their faces. Her viewers were eating it up. The comment feed was flooded with variations of he is playing chess while they are playing checkers. Carla studied him. You are not giving them much room. That is because there is no room, Eli said calmly. Every day you delay is another day passengers wonder if they will be the next person told they do not belong in their seat. Every day you delay is another potential lawsuit. And every day you delay is another live-streamed humiliation that goes viral before your PR team can draft a statement. She glanced around, noticing how many passengers were pretending not to listen, but were clearly hanging on every word. The gravity of the moment pressed in on her. Eli took a sip of water, then set the glass down without breaking eye contact. This is not a negotiation. Carla, it is a pivot point. I am giving the board a clear choice with a visible consequence. If they refuse, I divest and take others with me. And I will ensure this flight is the example used in every interview, every panel, every shareholder meeting where bias in the airline industry is discussed. Her fingers tightened around the armrest. You realize if they cave too quickly, they will fear appearing weak. Eli allowed a small smile. Let them reframe it as vision. No one remembers how a decision was made if the result is transformative. From her seat across the aisle, Maya could feel the tension vibrating in the air. She typed into her stream's chat, "This is history. You are watching corporate change happen in real time." The chime of an incoming message came from Carla's phone. She checked the screen, her eyes narrowing slightly. That was from our Chief Operating Officer. The media has picked up the story already. Several outlets are running stills from the live stream. The hashtag Seat1A is trending. Eli's voice was quiet but decisive. By the time we land, it will be more than a hashtag. It will be a benchmark. Carla's phone vibrated again. She scanned the message, then looked at Eli. "They want me to put you in direct contact with the CEO before we land." "Not yet," Eli said. "We speak after I have confirmed that the crew members who initiated this incident are removed from all active rosters pending review, and after the board has received my protocol in full." Carla hesitated. "That will take coordination mid-flight." "Then I suggest you start coordinating," Eli replied. Her jaw set. Carla rose and stepped into the galley, pulling out her phone and speaking in a low, urgent voice. Eli leaned back in his seat. His gaze drifted to the window, where the wingtip light cut a sharp glow against the dark. He thought about how many times he had been in situations like this, where the balance between anger and control determined the outcome. Tonight, he had chosen control. But beneath it, the memory of the initial insult still burned. Maya lowered her phone slightly and leaned forward. "You know you just cornered an entire corporation." "Right." Eli's lips curved faintly. "I am not cornering them. I am giving them a door to walk through. They just have to choose to open it." Carla returned 10 minutes later, her expression more focused. "The crew members have been removed from all active flights pending investigation. That decision was confirmed by operations just now. The CEO will receive your protocol within the hour." Eli nodded once. "Good. Now I will speak with him." She offered her phone. "You can use mine. It is a secure channel." Eli accepted it and waited while she connected the call. When the line opened, the voice on the other end was low and formal. "Mr. Grant, this is Michael Vance." "Mr. Vance," Eli said evenly. "We will keep this brief. I am on one of your aircraft in Seat 1A. An incident occurred tonight that demonstrates a failure in your frontline training, oversight, and accountability systems. I have presented the Grant protocol to your district manager. I expect its full adoption." There was a pause. "That is a significant commitment," Vance said. "The alternative," Eli replied, "is the loss of $2.3 billion in institutional investment and a public relations crisis you will not recover from in a single fiscal year. The choice is yours." Another pause. "Then I will convene the board immediately." Do that, Eli said, and know that whatever you decide, the public will see your answer in your actions. He ended the call and handed the phone back to Carla. For a moment, the cabin was silent again. Then, somewhere behind him, a passenger began to clap. It was a slow, deliberate rhythm that spread row by row until the entire first-class section was applauding. Eli did not raise his hand to stop them. He simply sat, letting the sound wash over him, knowing it was not just approval for him, but for the fact that someone had stood their ground and refused to move. The cabin air felt heavier, as though the altitude had compressed more than just oxygen. Somewhere over the Atlantic, a boardroom was forming in the ether. Through encrypted channels, the executives of Pacific Skies Airlines were gathering from different time zones, their faces blinking into a secure video call. Eli remained in 1A, aware of the invisible ripple his words had set in motion. He did not need to be in the boardroom to feel its temperature. It was the same sensation he had learned in his years building an empire when money and pride collided. The air grew charged. Carla Devereaux returned from the galley, her tablet in hand. "They are in session," she said quietly. "The CEO wants you to know they are reviewing your protocol point by point." Eli gave a small nod. And their tone, Carla hesitated. "Divided. Some are calling it visionary. Others think it is corporate blackmail. But everyone agrees the optics of tonight are volatile." From 2 rows back, Maya Torres was still streaming to an audience now pushing 40,000 live viewers. The comments were relentless. Some were dissecting the grant protocol as though it were a piece of legislation. Others were urging Pacific Skies to adopt it immediately, flooding the airline's official accounts with messages. Eli leaned forward slightly. "Carla, when they reach point 3, the independent ombudsman remind them that internal investigations have already failed them. Tonight is proof." She made a quick note on her tablet. "Understood." The intercom crackled, and the captain's voice came through. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are expecting some light turbulence ahead. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." The seatbelt chime rang out, and the cabin crew moved briskly to secure carts and trays. As they worked, Eli caught one attendant stealing a glance at him. There was something unspoken in her look, a quiet acknowledgement, almost gratitude. Carla's phone buzzed. She read the message, her brows lifting slightly. "The board has just voted on point 1. Mandatory bias training passed unanimously." Eli allowed himself a slow exhale. 1 step, and point 2. They are debating cost. But she glanced at her screen again. The CEO just told them it is non-negotiable. Your phrase about preventing nights like this from repeating has already been repeated twice in the meeting. Outside the window, the clouds shifted into streaks under the moonlight. The turbulence began, a subtle rocking of the cabin, but inside 1A the only motion was the steady exchange between Carla's updates and Eli's quiet directives. Maya's camera caught a small moment Eli adjusting his cuff link with deliberate calm while Carla leaned in to share another result. The comments lit up again. "That man is running a board meeting from a plane without even raising his voice." Another buzz from Carla's tablet. Point 2 passed, 9-3. The dissenters were overruled by the chair. "Good," Eli said. His mind was already on point 3.
"The ombudsman will be the hardest sell. They will fear losing control." Carla nodded. "I will frame it as regaining trust instead." A slight jolt ran through the aircraft as they hit another pocket of turbulence. Cups rattled on tray tables. Eli kept his eyes on Carla and remind them trust is harder to rebuild than stock price. She tapped the note into her tablet. Understood. The next update came faster than expected. Carla's lips curved faintly. Point 3 passed by a narrow margin. 6-5. Eli allowed a brief nod. That was the pivot. With the ombudsman in place, the rest would follow. Behind them, Maya whispered to her phone, "I think we are watching a corporation turn in real time. He is winning." The turbulence smoothed out, and the cabin steadied. Carla was already glancing at her screen again. Point 4 approved without contest. They like the idea of publishing audit results. They think it will restore credibility. And point 5, Eli asked. She paused, then smiled faintly. Passed. Unanimous. They are even suggesting expanding the scholarship fund to $75 million to make a bigger statement. Eli leaned back in his seat, the faintest trace of a smile on his face. Then they understand the value of scale. Carla exhaled as if she had been holding her breath for an hour. The board has voted to adopt the grant protocol in full, effective immediately. For a moment, there was only the low hum of the engines. Then Eli said, "Send me the signed resolution before we land, and make sure the crew who initiated this are permanently removed from service. They have already been flagged for termination review," Carla said. "The CEO wants to meet you in person when we land in London." Eli nodded. "That will happen, but first, the public will hear from me." Maya's head snapped up at that. "You are going public tonight," she whispered. Eli looked at her. "The world is already watching. I am just making sure they hear the truth from the source." Carla checked her watch. "We land in 6 hours. The press will be waiting." "They will not have to wait that long," Eli said. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out his own phone. His fingers moved with precision, drafting a short statement. Every word was weighed, every sentence calculated to both inform and inspire. When he was done, he handed the phone to Maya. "Read that aloud to your viewers, then post it on every platform you can reach." She scanned the message, her eyes widening. This is going to explode." "Exactly," Eli said. Maya lifted her phone, unmuted her mic, and read, "This is Elijah Grant, CEO of Grant Global Logistics and shareholder in Pacific Skies Airlines. Tonight I was told I did not belong in my assigned seat. I refused to move. I stood my ground, not just for myself, but for every passenger who has been dismissed, diminished, or denied because of bias. I presented the grant protocol to the board tonight. They have adopted it in full. This is not just about one flight. This is about changing the course of an entire industry." The reaction was instant. Comments poured in faster than the feed could display them. Screenshots of the statement began to circulate. Hashtags multiplied. Carla looked at Eli, her voice quieter now. "You just rewrote the story before it even landed." Eli's gaze stayed steady. That was the point. Outside the aircraft, the sky stretched into an endless black horizon. Inside, the direction of an airline had shifted forever. The ripple from Eli's statement spread through the aircraft like an electric current. Passengers who had been politely avoiding eye contact with him now turned openly in their seats, their faces reflecting something between admiration and disbelief. Maya Torres kept her phone steady as comments poured across the screen in a blur. She read a few out loud for those nearby. "This is what leadership looks like. I am booking my next flight with Pacific Skies just to support this. Make Eli Grant the CEO of every airline." Eli sat still, his hands folded in his lap, letting the noise flow around him without pulling him in. Inside, his thoughts moved with deliberate care. He knew that the moment was fragile. If he appeared too triumphant, it would look like a personal victory instead of the structural change he intended. If he looked defeated, the momentum would falter. Balance was everything now. Carla Devereaux approached again, tablet in hand. "Mr. Grant, I have just received the official board resolution. It includes all 5 points of your protocol. They have authorized me to inform the media immediately. Send it to my communications team first. Eli said, they will control the release. It is important that the public hears it directly, but not chaotically. Carla gave a short nod and stepped back, already typing a message. The captain's voice returned over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we are currently at 35,000 feet and on schedule for our arrival in London. Weather is clear ahead, and we expect a smooth descent. We do ask that you remain in your seats as we continue our flight. The calm tone contrasted sharply with the turbulence in the digital world below them. News outlets had begun to pick up Maya's live stream, embedding clips of Eli's statement alongside headlines like Passenger CEO Forces Airline Overhaul Mid-Flight. A flight attendant passed by, her eyes lingering on Eli with a mixture of respect and unease. Sir, would you like another drink water? Please, Eli replied. When she returned with a chilled bottle and a glass, she hesitated before speaking. I wanted to say I saw what happened earlier. I wish I had stepped in sooner. I am sorry. Eli met her gaze. Acknowledging it matters. Acting next time matters more. She nodded, almost gratefully, and moved on. Maya shifted in her seat, clearly bursting with questions. Do you think Ava Collins knows yet? Eli's eyes flicked toward the galley where Ava had retreated hours ago. If she does not, she will soon, and indeed, in the narrow crew space. Ava sat rigid, her phone vibrating relentlessly. She had stopped checking the messages after the first dozen texts from colleagues, friends, and even her manager. Some were short and cutting, others were almost panicked. One, from a fellow attendant she had trained years ago, simply said, "They are calling this the Collins incident." She pressed the phone against her leg, trying to steady her breathing. In her mind, she replayed the moment she had told Eli to move, the tone she had used, the certainty that she was in the right. It had felt routine then, just another situation to control. But now, each memory felt like a crack widening under her feet. At the front of the cabin, Carla's phone buzzed again. She approached Eli quietly. "Mr. Grant, the CEO has issued an internal memo, effective immediately. Ava Collins and Sandra Holt are suspended pending termination review. They will not work another flight until the investigation is complete." Eli absorbed the words without reaction. "And the passenger, Mr. Kane, has been flagged in the customer incident database. He will not be upgraded to premium seating on any Pacific Skies flight for the next 5 years." A faint murmur swept through the first-class section as Carla returned to her seat. Passengers who had overheard exchanged glances, some nodding in approval. Maya's phone buzzed with another wave of notifications. "Your name is trending number 1 in the U.S. and number 3 globally," she said. "People are quoting your line about nights like this not repeating." Eli reached for his glass of water and took a slow sip. Good. That is the part they should remember. The minutes stretched into hours, the cabin settling into a quieter rhythm. Yet beneath it all, a sense of anticipation built steadily, like the climb before a drop. Every person on board knew that the landing would not be just another arrival. With 2 hours left in the flight, Carla returned. "The board wants you to join their emergency press briefing upon landing. The CEO has requested you stand beside him." Eli considered this. "I will attend, but only if the protocol is the central focus, not my name." "They understand," she said. "Frankly, they need you there to show unity." Eli's gaze drifted toward the dark sky outside the window. "Unity is earned. We will see if they are ready for it." Back in the galley.
Ava leaned against the counter, staring at the floor. She could hear fragments of conversation from the passengers, feel their eyes on her when she stepped into view. The certainty she had felt earlier in the evening had dissolved entirely, replaced by a raw awareness that her career might already be over. She had been in the industry long enough to know how quickly public opinion could become permanent judgment. And she could not stop replaying Eli's calm refusal, the way he had looked at her without anger, but with an authority she could not match. Maya glanced at the galley door and then back to Eli. Do you think she regrets it? Regret without understanding is just fear. Eli said quietly. Whether she changes depends on what she does after the fear fades. An hour before descent, the captain announced they had begun their gradual approach. The city lights of London would be visible soon. The cabin crew moved through the aisles, securing the cabin for landing, but the air still hummed with a different kind of readiness. Carla leaned over. Mr. Grant, the media has been told you will speak. They are expecting you to outline the protocol publicly for the first time. Eli closed his eyes briefly, gathering his thoughts.
Then we will make it clear this is not a concession made to one man, but a commitment to every passenger who steps onto their aircraft. As the nose of the plane angled slightly downward, the city began to emerge from the dark horizon, a scattering of golden light stretching toward the Thames. In the galley. Ava gripped the counter tighter as the landing gear thumped into position. She wondered if the runway ahead would be the end of her career or the start of something she could not yet imagine. In 1A, Eli sat composed, ready to step into the waiting flash of cameras, knowing the moment they touched down would mark not the end of the night's events, but the beginning of something larger than even this flight. The descent into London was steady and calm, but the energy inside the aircraft was anything but. Passengers sat upright, watching the faint glow of the city grow brighter beneath them. Somewhere beyond those lights, cameras were already waiting. Eli Grant sat in 1A, back straight, expression unreadable. His mind replayed the evening in deliberate detail, the confrontation, the resistance, the negotiation, the final shift of corporate will. It felt both immediate and strangely distant, as though it had happened to someone else and he was now stepping in to claim the results. Carla Devereaux was across the aisle, speaking in a low voice to her phone. Yes, he will speak. Yes, the protocol is in place. No, there will be no delay. She glanced at Eli, caught his calm gaze, and gave a slight nod. The seatbelt sign chimed on. The captain's voice followed. Ladies and gentlemen, we are making our final approach into London Heathrow. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened and tray tables are secured. We will be on the ground in approximately 15 minutes. In the galley. Ava Collins stood still, hands clasped tightly. Her uniform was flawless, but her composure was frayed. She could hear the occasional whisper of passengers as they passed. She did not need to hear the exact words to know they were about her. Every step she took toward the front of the cabin felt heavier than the last. Maya Torres angled her phone so her audience could see the view outside the window, rows of orange streetlights sliding by under the wing. "We are almost here," she whispered to her viewers. "And this is not the end. It is the start of something much bigger." The landing gear lowered with a distant thud. A few passengers murmured in anticipation. The runway lights appeared like a pathway of stars, and seconds later, the wheels touched down with a solid jolt. The reverse thrust roared briefly before the engines eased, guiding the plane toward its gate. When the seatbelt sign went off, no one rushed to the aisle. The passengers in first class seemed to understand they were part of a moment that required stillness. Carla stepped forward, leaning close to Eli. "Security will meet us at the door. The press briefing is set up in the VIP lounge. The CEO is already there." Eli stood, smoothing his jacket. Then, let us go meet them. Maya followed, her phone still streaming, careful to stay just far enough back to avoid intruding, but close enough to capture every step. As Eli reached the aircraft door, he paused. Ava Collins stood to the side, eyes fixed on the floor. He looked at her for a moment, his expression calm. "Ms. Collins," he said, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "How you handle what comes next will define you more than what happened tonight." She looked up, startled, but he had already turned and stepped into the jet bridge. Security escorted them through a quiet corridor into the VIP lounge. Inside, the CEO of Pacific Skies, Michael Vance, waited in front of a backdrop bearing the airline's logo. Several board members stood nearby, faces composed but tense, but beyond them, a cluster of reporters adjusted their microphones and cameras. Vance extended his hand. "Mr. Grant, thank you for agreeing to be here." Eli shook his hand once, firmly. "I am here for the protocol. Let us focus on that." They stepped to the podium together. The flashes from cameras were immediate, strobing the room with white light. Vance spoke first. "Tonight, an incident occurred aboard Pacific Skies Flight 227 that does not reflect our values or our commitment to every passenger's dignity and safety. We have taken immediate action. The Grant Protocol, a comprehensive reform package addressing bias, accountability, and transparency, has been adopted in full effect immediately." He turned toward Eli. "Mr. Grant, as both a shareholder and a passenger, you have our thanks for holding us to a higher standard." Eli stepped to the microphone. The room quieted. His voice was steady, carrying the weight of both the night and his intent. "I did not ask for what happened tonight. I did not come here seeking confrontation, but when bias meets silence, silence becomes agreement. I refuse to agree, not just for myself, but for the countless others who have been told, in one way or another, that they do not belong. This protocol is not about one seat on one flight. It is about ensuring that no passenger is diminished or dismissed because of who they are. It is about holding ourselves accountable in real time, not after the damage is done. And it is about remembering that the measure of a company is not how it responds when things go well, but how it corrects course when it goes wrong." The cameras clicked rapidly. Some reporters were already typing his words into headlines. Eli stepped back, signaling he was done. He had no interest in drawing it out. The message was delivered. After the briefing, Vance leaned in quietly. "I suspect this will be studied in leadership seminars for years. Only if you keep your word," Eli replied. He left the lounge without lingering, flanked by Carla and a pair of security officers. Outside, the cool London air hit his face. The city was waking, but his work tonight was done. Maya caught up with him just before he entered his car. "Mr. Grant, one question for my viewers. What do you hope happens next?" He paused, then looked directly into her camera. "I hope people remember they do not have to be CEOs to stand their ground. They just have to refuse to give it up." The door closed, and the car pulled away into the London morning, in the galley of the now empty plane. Ava Collins sat alone for a moment, staring at her reflection in the darkened window. She did not know where her career would go from here, but for the first time in years, she felt the sharp edge of accountability, and it cut through every assumption she had carried about the limits of her authority. In the terminal, passengers from 1A through 1F exchanged brief nods with one another before heading their separate ways. They might never meet again, but they would remember that night not for the turbulence or the landing, but for the moment someone refused to move. Far above the city, another aircraft traced a slow arc in the morning light.
its passengers unaware that the ground had just shifted beneath the industry they were flying in. Tonight, one man's refusal to surrender his seat became something greater than a passenger dispute. Elijah Grant's quiet strength forced an airline to look in the mirror and admit what too many had ignored for too long, that bias doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers through policies, through standard procedure, through the subtle ways people are told they don't belong. But here, in the narrow aisle of a first-class cabin, we saw what happens when someone chooses not to step aside. Not with anger, not with insults, but with unwavering calm and the weight of truth. It was a victory for accountability, for dignity, for every traveler who has ever felt the sting of prejudice in silence. Yet this story isn't just about Eli. It's about the choice we all face when we see injustice. Will we look away, or will we stand our ground? Remember, change doesn't always roar. Sometimes it speaks in a voice steady enough to be heard above the engines. If this story moved you, like it, share it, and subscribe to our channel. More stories are coming, stories that challenge, inspire, and remind us that respect should never be a privilege. It should be the starting point.